What's going on, my beautiful friends? We're here. We got a bag of smoke. Smoking on some tobacco. I have been experimenting a little bit in different herbs and things like that. I mean, I have been finding that some spliffs, a little bit of weed with the tobacco has been nice. I find if it's just straight weed, that it sometimes can be harder to do like very mental work, because I just start dreaming and want to just get creative and like make music or some shit. So mixing the tobacco with that, I find helps to maintain that linearization, being able to stay linear and logical with things, so I can stay on track while the weed kind of opens things up a little bit. And I use some other herbs and stuff as well that I've been experimenting with. But also with that experimentation has been really just, and this aligns with the theme of my life really lately, has been surrender and just allowing and acceptance. Because I've noticed when I began this journey of really trying to optimize myself and ultimately realize my full potential, I realized that I had to become very rigid at first, because there was like different imbalances, there was different things that needed to be addressed. And for me, with my background as an athlete, I just knew how to make shit happen. And that was just kind of like the warrior in me of just making shit happen. And so that was the same mentality where I would just do whatever I thought that I needed to do to get the job done, to achieve the result. And I think a lot of us start out this way. And a lot of us, I mean, that's where we're at. And that's, if you look at many successful entrepreneurs and successful athletes, and really just successful people in general, at least in the way that we use that word, which a lot of times is associated with, money and status and power and things of that nature. And a lot of people that have achieved those things have done so through a large act of will and of force and just like making shit happen. And so I think there's a lot of merit to that mentality, because I think that is initially what gets people going. That's what gets you off the couch to make shit happen. And a lot of times it's because the situation that you're currently in is painful enough for you, is uncomfortable enough for you to finally be like, I need to do something about this. And so that's what gets you going, and that's what got me going. And that's what has pushed me really this whole time. But at a certain point, and maybe not everybody comes to this, maybe it's just me, because we all have different experiences, even though there's kind of these archetypal universal themes that go on. But every time, or not every time, but as I continued this journey, and as I've gotten to this place of really just working as hard as I possibly could, because the way that I noticed that I do things is I go to the extreme. I kind of find the edges of a system, of myself, of some kind of framework, whatever that might be. I also got some espresso going on here. It's real nice. I find the edges, and that allows me to see really where the limits are, where the limitations are. Because if you stay kind of within the confines of everything, it's hard to tell if it's what you're doing is really the best way to do things unless you really push it. And so I did that with my training. Being an athlete, I pushed myself as hard as I possibly could. I mean, I was doing 10 sessions a week at one point, going heavy basically every single session. And I saw the positives of that. And I also saw the drawbacks of that, because I ended up, I just burned myself out just because it wasn't sustainable, at least my beliefs about what was possible weren't aligned with the amount of output that I was doing. It's a key distinction there that I'm coming to terms with more and more here as I continue on this journey. And when I'm recording this, I just turned 28, and so if you subscribe to kind of the theme of 7-year cycles, where they say that every cell in your body turns over every 7 years, although some people say 1 year, but it's a helpful kind of theme, is every 7 years of life we kind of enter into a new cycle. So if you think about from the years of 0 to 7, very formative, developmental, that's where a lot of our programming gets done, is within those first 7 years, why they're critical for setting the stage for our journey in this life. And then 7 to 14, we're kind of creating the groundwork of our identity and like who we are. And then 14 to 7 is this process of kind of tapping into our, like starting to think for ourselves and starting to question things and starting to really differentiate ourselves and initiate this process of individuation. And then I would say from 21 to 28 is this cycle of really what feels to me like just being a warrior, of you've kind of, you're really just going and putting yourself out there to make shit happen, to establish your place in the world, to see who you really are and what you're going to be bringing to the table, to this life. And then the next cycle, 28 to 35, which is what I have just entered into in this kind of theme of 7-year cycles. This next cycle is the kingship. It is building the kingdom. And it's a lot of the idea of what got you here isn't going to take you there. And so I realized like that warrior mentality, what served me so well through this last cycle of my life, can actually become my Achilles heel if I don't learn how to transcend it. Which, transcending doesn't necessarily mean you're getting rid of it. Transcending is you're transcending and including. And so the warrior doesn't leave, but now the function of that warrior takes a different place. Now moving into the king archetype, now the warrior is something to be called upon when needed, but it is not the driving force anymore. It's like, if you think of a king in kind of the stereotypical medieval times, where the king wasn't necessarily always going out and fighting and, doing the battles and doing the dirty work per se, but he or she, queen, he was still, if he needed to go out there, there was no question. He would do what needed to be done, but that wasn't his main job. And actually, it was better to protect the king, to not put the king into danger, because the king was in charge of putting all the pieces together and seeing the big picture and making those decisions. And so as I'm moving into that realm, I'm discovering more and more that the way forward, the way to continue this growth is to surrender, is to allow for the allowing, is to just accept all that is. Because every time, and the reason why, I'm coming full circle with this here bag of smoke, because every time you come up against some kind of resistance within yourself, whether that's some kind of idea or, something that an expectation of what you thought was going to be but didn't turn out that way, or how you think you should show up, but maybe that doesn't feel necessarily like who you are in that moment. And so the more, and a lot of this has to do with facing our own fears, which there's these kind of deep core, often unconscious underlying fears that essentially run our lives, like the fear of rejection, the fear of failure, which a lot of those fears can be stemmed from this core basic fear of the fear of death. And not just the physical death, but also the fear of our own identity, the ego death, which it fights so valiantly and cleverly to uphold, which allows for this whole illusion of separation, which is necessary because this is part of our evolutionary process. But if it is not transcended, you can continue to just operate out of those fears. So part of the evolutionary process, and I would say really the main work of this evolutionary process, is to face and embrace and accept and surrender to those underlying fears. And so part of those fears for me, one of the things that I noticed was this idea that things had to be a certain way in order to function optimally. And on surface level, that seems like common sense. But a lot of this work in facing your fears is being open to possibility and questioning yourself and questioning your ideas, especially on the things that you've just believed for so long that they just seem like they're a common sense fact. Those, when you find those things, which they're all over the place if you just pay attention, which is why meditative and contemplative practices are so important, because they help you build that awareness. They're a tool. But the more you realize all of those things, you notice all of those things, then you can question those things. And so even that question, that idea that things have to be a certain way in order to function optimally, I realized was just an idea. And that, is there really a certain way for things to be? Is not how things are at this moment exactly how they're supposed to be? So you see how when you start to ask different questions, you start to ask better quality questions, you get better quality answers. And so when I started asking myself that question and started getting better answers, I realized that more and more, me just embracing the current moment and exactly how it is doing the work to grow myself and become more and more of my idea of optimal, which again is just an idea. Because even then I have, I get trapped into these ideas of how I think things should be, what I think my ultimate potential looks like. And the moment you get trapped by an idea, you cut yourself off, because an idea is a potential, where you have this idea out of all this infinite number of ideas, and then you latch on to that idea, and it does exist as a potential. But if you get too caught to that idea, then you could close yourself off from the other possibilities that maybe you weren't even aware of, because you didn't know how to ask the right question to lead to that possibility. So maybe the right question to ask is, how do I just not have to ask any more questions and just allow for the surrender, allow for the flow of life? And you notice this terminology is much more feminine, is much more watery, and like the masculine of like, I got to get shit done and fuck how I feel and just show up and do the work. Again, both polarities are needed, but you'll find that as you navigate through life, you'll start, the pendulum swings. You'll kind of move from one direction to the other, from one side to another. And that's perfectly okay. And that's part of the process. And so again, coming back to this old bag of smoke here, I used to have ideas about, how much I should smoke, or, what I should do, what I shouldn't do, what was ideal for who I am and my level of health. And even like smoking weed more than a couple times a week, it had this label as like, that's bad. I shouldn't do that because it's not, quote unquote, optimal. And then as I lean more and more into that and asking the same questions that I've presented here to myself, I started to realize more and more that like what if, I mean, and there is a possibility, not to say that this is the possibility that I choose to lean into, but there's the possibility that I could just do whatever the fuck I want. I could smoke, 20 bags a day. I can drink 5 espressos a day. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, other than the idea of how I think things are supposed to be. And so as I feel more into that, I'm noticing there's more and more of this, there's this balancing act that goes on where you have this, and this is what I've been working on and kind of, behind the scenes in a sense. How do you create the right amount of structure so that you can hold things into place that you know that you need to be accountable for, that you're holding yourself responsible to in this kind of physical, this world, this life that we're living, while at the same time and through that structure actually creating more freedom and more abundance of time, of resources, of whatever, to allow for being, to not do anything. So it's like, how do I do the right amount of the right stuff to allow the greatest amount of not having to do anything, to just be? And the more that I lean into just being, the more this sense of freedom begins to open up, and the more, and paradoxically, the more I find myself aligned to these things that I would normally say, like, oh, I shouldn't do that, or oh, that's not healthy, or that isn't the right thing for me right now, that isn't optimal for me right now. And for me, it's less of this logical conclusion, because the more you surrender, the more you start approaching life from the heart, and even like through the gut, and not necessarily just through the logical, rational mind. Like you use this faculty to communicate, to, put things together, to break things apart. And it's very, very helpful. But if it becomes over dominant, which is so prevalent, and it's so prevalent that we kind of have this idea, this sense that it's just how things are, it's the only way. But if you get too lost into that, then you lose that intelligence of your heart, that intelligence of your gut, that honestly long predates the development of the kind of the neocortex of our thinking brain. And when you lean into that through that process of surrender, you start to tap more and more into just the natural flow of life, and more into this sense of divine will, where everything, like where I'm at in this moment, is not only, it's the only place that I can really be. I can't be in the past other than my ideas. I can't be in the future other than my ideas. And at a certain level, past and future don't even exist, because they are products of the mind, of the illusion of separation. And what is beyond that is really eternal. This moment is eternal. And when I align myself to that and just allow the moments to unfold through the process of just being present and surrendering to the moment, the more I move through my heart. Because again, the heart doesn't give a shit about your crazy ideas and the businesses that you're trying to build. The heart is concerned with love. The heart is concerned with connection, with unification, with this process of remembering who you are at your core. And really, that's this whole process of evolution anyways. And recognizing that, again, at least for me, it could be totally different for you. Recognizing that for myself lets me get a better perspective of where this is ultimately heading. Because again, like, what's the point of having a shit ton of money? What's the point of owning a bunch of businesses? What's the point of doing all of these things, like being a world champion athlete? Like on a surface level, what is really the point of that? Okay, I do that thing, I get that thing. What does that really do in the overall grand scheme of things? And so for me, recognizing this spiritual evolution that we're all undergoing, that this entire, physical dimension is undergoing, is unfolding, and aligning myself to that is ultimately just this process of aligning to just the natural flow and current of life, like a river. I'm not trying to, the path of least resistance, which again, it brings up this idea that if I'm not working hard, if I'm not, exuding a lot of effort to make something happen, then it's not worthwhile. And so we have this very deep rooted idea too, that in order for something to be any significance, it means that you have to work really, really hard for it. If you didn't work really, really hard for it, then it was too easy. It didn't really count. Anybody could do it. And I recognized that as an idea, and I started asking myself the question, what if this all was just really easy? What if that's a potential? It all just comes so easily. Like, I don't even have to do anything other than just be me. And as I've leaned more into that, what do you know? It's manifesting. Like it's literally does have to be, or does it has the potential to be that easy, and it can be that easy where things just flow. But the trick is, like, the actual hard work isn't the actual effort of, like, physical effort of something. The actual hard work is this process of learning how, or really unlearning how to make shit so difficult, and learning how to make things easy, which is this process of surrender. So it's like the hardest work that you could do is to learn how to surrender. And it's not really something that you can learn, because it's just a process of being. So the hardest work that you can do is no work at all. And I can't really think of a more true statement than that, because that has been my experience. Because I've noticed the harder I work, the less results I get. The less I work, the more results I get. Because the less I work, the more I'm coming to terms with what is actually important to do and aligning myself to that. So that's my invitation for you. I see my camera blinking here. I think my battery's about to die, so I don't want to lose this. But I think we've gotten to a good place here. So my invitation for you is to is to just contemplate, just to be with the process of surrendering, and start asking yourself those questions. What would this look like if it was easy? What would this look like if where I am right here in this moment is exactly where I'm supposed to be? How would things change? And finding that changelessness, that part of you that is changeless, that is eternal, within the midst of all the change that is going on. And yes, these are some deeper teachings, but this is the important shit. This is the shit that, like, I'm continuously navigating and processing within my own development. So part of me teaching this is also helping me to learn. And that's the trick. That's why I'm here. This is important work. It's not only helping other people, but it is also helping me, which it's a cycle. And that's when you know you're on the right track of you giving is you receiving. You receiving is you giving. There's not this idea of winning and losing, of I give and now I'm depleted, now I have less. The more I give, the more I get, because my giving is in line with who I am. At least that's my idea. Because guess what? Even speaking of this shit, you already miss the point. It's the finger. It's the label that is pointing. These words are just pointing to something underneath. My invitation is to go on a journey to find what is underneath and beyond and above and below, because it's all the same shit. I love you. Have an amazing day. Thank you for tuning in. I'll talk to you very soon. Peace.